When you really think about the scale of global migration, I mean, the sheer staggering distance that these tiny animals cover, it just forces you to consider the logistics of it
It's
all.
mind-boggling.
Right. Imagine a little ringed plover. It weighs maybe 50 grams and it sets off from its breeding ground in Sweden and flies all the way down to winter in sub-Saharan Africa.
Thousands of miles,
Mm.
often nonstop over places like the Sahara Desert or the Mediterranean. It's an insane challenge.
It is.
It's the ultimate resource management problem because they are essentially flying on a ticking clock, and they're powered only by stored body fat.
Exactly. So that brings up the big question. What is this tiny traveler's single biggest operational priority? Is it minimizing the time the journey takes?
Or is it minimizing the energy cost? How much fuel they actually burn.
Or is it just simply maximizing their chances of survival? The three big legs of migration.
And that's the constant trade-off. I mean, they can fly faster, but that means shorter stops and lighter fuel loads,
Mm.
which might increase the risk of getting caught short. Or they can fly heavier and slower, save energy, but that takes longer overall.
Wow.
And that increases the mortality risk over the long haul.
And that is the mission of this deep dive. We are looking at a landmark study that put these really sophisticated sensors on the little ringed plover, or LRP,
Right?
to rigorously test which of those core strategies, speed or efficiency, this long-distance shorebird actually prioritizes. And they're doing it within this academic framework called optimal migration theory.
And the LRP is just a fantastic candidate for this kind of research. They are truly long-haul flyers.
How long are we talking?
We're talking an average of nearly 6,000 kilometers in the autumn and over 5,600 kilometers in the spring. They range across this huge swath of the African continent.
Wow. And what makes them so useful for researchers in this case?
Well, unlike some other shorebirds that might rely on, say, 2 or 3 massive singular stopovers, the LRP uses many successive flight steps.
Okay, so more data points.
A huge volume of data points. We get to see the day-to-day decisions they're making. How long to stay at the current gas station and how much fuel to take on before the next leg. We can literally watch their strategy unfold across an entire season.
Okay, so let's unpack this using the data from these incredible little loggers. I mean, what were they even measuring, and what's the core academic idea we need to get our heads around?
So we're operating within something called optimal migration theory, or OMT.
Right.
And you can visualize it pretty simply. Migrating birds constantly alternate between accumulating energy during stopovers and then spending that stored energy during flight.
It's a logistics system. It's like a very hungry airline trying to move the maximum distance with the minimum cost.
That's a perfect analogy. The core difficulty for the bird is balancing the benefit of adding more fuel against the penalty of actually carrying that fuel.
Ah, so there's a downside to being heavier.
A huge downside. A larger fuel load lets you fly longer, but carrying all that extra weight makes the actual flying aerodynamically much more costly, the classic case of diminishing returns.
So the goal is to find that sweet spot, that perfect time to leave the stopover. Now, the theory gives us two major competing predictions about how a bird might choose that sweet spot. What's the first one?
The first major prediction is what we call the constant fuel policy. This one is all about minimizing energy costs.
Okay.
If the LRPs are following this policy, they should always leave the stopover at the same optimal fuel load no matter what.
So if they arrive and food is scarce and they're fueling up really slowly, they might have to stay for 5 days to hit that target.
Exactly.
But if food is everywhere, maybe they only stay for 2 days.
Precisely. The stopover duration would vary widely, but because that target fuel load is always constant, the subsequent flight duration should be relatively constant as well. So a pure efficiency-first model.
Efficiency first, time varies. Got it. Okay, so what's the rival approach?
That's the second prediction, the speed-first policy. This one aims to minimize the total time of the entire journey.
So they're in a hurry.
They're in a hurry. And in this case, they don't stick to a fixed fuel load. They become incredibly flexible. They look at how fast they are fueling up the local fuel deposition rate, and then they decide, is it worth staying here another day, or should I just take a medium tank and get to the next site where fueling might be better?
That sounds much more complex. They're basically adjusting the size of their gas tank on the fly based on, local economic conditions.
They are. And under this speed-first policy, we'd expect the stopover duration and the flight duration afterwards to be strongly related. They should covery, as we say.
So if they stay longer, they fly longer. If they rush, they make a shorter hop.
That's the prediction.
Yeah.
And this is where the technology becomes the absolute star of the show. We're not talking a simple leg bands here. We're tracking the bird's actual activity in high resolution.
How did they do that?
They use these multi-sensor data loggers, MDLs. Now, weight is always a crucial consideration for a tiny flyer, and these averaged only 2.8% of the bird's body mass.
That's critical.
It is a device that light is already impressive, but what it measured was the key.
Which was?
It recorded activity using high-resolution accelerometers, and it also provided geolocation data.
Wow.
So for the first time, researchers had these detailed activity logs down to the minute, confirming exactly when the bird was flying and when it was stopped.
Wow.
It gave them an unprecedented opportunity to accurately measure the precise duration of every single flight step and every single stopover.
Okay, so they collected all this amazing data for a bunch of LRP migrations. So did the birds act like these disciplined, consistent gas fillers following that constant fuel policy?
The answer was crystal clear almost immediately. The variability in their behavior was enormous.
Really?
The study found that both the stopover durations and the subsequent flight steps varied substantially, not just between birds, but across the whole season for a single bird.
So the idea of a fixed tank size, that constant fuel policy, is just out the window.
Yes, the immediate wide variance meant they could definitively reject it. The LRPs are not pure energy minimizers that fly for a constant amount of time.
Which means they have to be prioritizing speed. So how did the data confirm that second idea, the speed-first policy?
The confirmation came from checking that second prediction, the covariation.
The link between stop time and flight time?
Exactly. And they found a strong, statistically significant relationship between the duration of the stopovers and the duration of the subsequent flights.
So a longer stop really did mean a longer flight.
Without a doubt, if a bird stayed for an unusually long time to fuel up, it absolutely used that extra fuel for a significantly longer flight step.
That perfectly supports the idea that the LRPs are optimizing for speed. They're adjusting their fuel loads dynamically based on local fueling conditions, all with the goal of minimizing total travel time. They're making calculated sacrifices.
They are flexible strategists. And while the average flight was pretty moderate, about 8.8 hours in autumn and 10.9 in spring, it's the outliers that really show their capacity.
We have to stop and talk about the outliers.
Absolutely. I mean, the LRPs were willing to push it. The longest nonstop flight recorded in the data was a marathon, 48 hours.
48 hours, that's 2 full days and 2 full nights of nonstop flight for a bird that tiny. Can we even contextualize what that physical effort means?
It means they flew for an entire weekend on one tank of gas. It just highlights the phenomenal metabolic capacity and endurance of these migrants.
It's incredible.
To sustain flight for 2 full days requires burning through all your stored fat reserves, maintaining constant effort against drag and gravity, often at high altitude. That single data point tells you they can go long if the strategic need is there. They aren't just making short hops.
So, okay, this is where it gets really interesting, because just confirming they are time minimizers isn't the end of the story.
Not even close.
The study found that their time minimizing strategy isn't static. It actually adapts to the environment in this highly sophisticated, seasonal way.
This brings us to the most subtle prediction of OMT, which we can call the seasonal gradient test.
Okay.
It predicts that a time-minimizing bird will strategically adjust the length of its flight steps, depending on whether the resources, food, fueling rates, are expected to be increasing or decreasing along the rest of the route.
That makes intuitive sense. You wouldn't want to burn a huge amount of fuel on a massive leap if you knew the next few spots were going to be barren.
But if you knew the next sector was rich, you might push hard to get there.
Precisely. So let's look at the LRP's 2 journeys. First, autumn migration.
Okay.
They're flying south from the harsh northern European breeding grounds toward the rich, diverse feeding habitats of sub-Saharan Africa.
So that's an increasing resource gradient. Resources get better the farther south you go. Right. And OMT predicts that under an increasing gradient, the birds should start with shorter, more conservative flights in the north, and then progressively increase their fuel loads and take longer flights as they get closer to those richer southern stopovers.
So they hedge their bets early on and then go for the long-haul leaps once they know the good fueling sites are ahead.
That's the theory.
And what about in the spring, when they reverse course?
Spring migration is the opposite. They're flying north toward the breeding grounds, often encountering scarcer, more unpredictable resources the farther north they get. And they're racing the clock to arrive at the best time for nesting.
So they are flying against a decreasing resource gradient.
And in that case, the theory predicts they should exploit the resource-rich wintering sites longer, depart with their largest fuel loads for the initial steps, and then progressively decrease the size of their flooded steps as they move north.
They use the best fuel early and then conserve as conditions worsen. That is a stunning level of anticipated behavioral sophistication. Did the data actually support this?
It did. And this is probably the strongest evidence for how sophisticated their time-minimizing policy is. The LRP showed two starkly diverging patterns between the seasons, exactly as predicted.
So tell us about the autumn pattern.
In autumn migration, we saw a distinct positive slope. The flight durations steadily increased as the season progressed, and the birds moved south.
Longer and longer flights the closer they got to Africa.
Exactly. It perfectly matches the strategy for flying toward a guaranteed improvement in resources.
And the spring pattern.
The exact opposite. Spring showed the predicted negative slope. Flight durations decreased with the progress of the season. They started strong, maximizing the benefit of those African fueling sites, and then shortened their subsequent flights as they got closer to the breeding grounds.
That is just compelling evidence. They're operating the same core speed-first policy, but they're dynamically adjusting their risk profile based on the environmental information they have about the rest of the route. They are true strategic travelers.
They're responding perfectly to environmental availability.
So if they are such staunch time minimizers, we'd expect spring migration to be much, much faster than autumn migration. Was the total journey time dramatically different?
Yes, the overall duration data confirms exactly that, but it introduces a major paradox.
Oh.
The autumn migration was significantly longer. It averaged about 90 days, with some birds taking up to 4 months.
4 months.
Whereas spring migration, by stark contrast, was fast and highly condensed, averaging only 37 days.
That's a huge difference in overall speed. Autumn was slow, around 77 kilometers per day, while spring was more than twice as fast at 168 kilometers per day.
And this is the crux of the final hypothesis, which explains the paradox. The researchers wanted to know, is the LRP just switching strategies in autumn? Are they becoming an energy minimizer?
Or is something else slowing them down? What was the answer?
The difference in overall speed is not due to a change in their core migration strategy. The LRP remains a time minimizer year-round. The massive slowdown in autumn is overwhelmingly due to a single external factor,
Which is
the long mid-migration stop they take.
And what are they doing during this huge layover?
They stop for a staggeringly long time, an average of 54 days, sometimes up to 83 days. And this is when they likely initiate molt.
Molt. They're replacing their feathers mid-journey.
They have to. They need to replace worn-out feathers before they can undertake the final long-distance flights, or before the next breeding season.
Wait, a 54-day stop? That's almost 2 months. That's a major biological maintenance stop that basically derails half the journey.
It does. And molt is a physically demanding process. You can't fly efficiently, sometimes not at all, while you're growing new flight feathers.
So they have to find a good spot and just sit tight.
Exactly. They find a resource-rich location, maybe in Central Europe or the Mediterranean, and dedicate that time to physiological maintenance. That single stop is what drives the vast difference in total duration.
That is such a key distinction. Their primary migration behavior is consistent, but a non-migration biological requirement, molt, drastically slows the overall clock down in the autumn.
Precisely. If you remove that stop over time and just look at the total time spent flying, the actual dedication to travel, it was almost identical between seasons.
How identical?
For one individual, it was 150 hours of flight in autumn versus 148 hours in spring. The estimated flight speed was also the same year-round at about 14.3 meters per second.
So the data confirms they use the same highly efficient speed-first strategy all year, but the clock is just manipulated by external factors like feather growth.
High behavioral consistency, despite massive environmental and biological variability.
Others showed a really specific tactic. It wasn't just one long flight after a long stop. How did they break up their flying?
The flights often occurred in these blocks or runs of 2 to 7 nocturnal flights on adjacent days.
So they fly all night.
And then the MDLs would record a short daytime layover, often less than 14 hours, before they resumed flying the next night.
That seems like an odd choice for a bird that is supposedly racing the clock. Why stop during the day, even briefly? They can't possibly refuel significantly in just a few hours.
You're right, they absolutely aren't. They're not accumulating enough fuel to power the next flight. Those short stops might only cover their immediate metabolic costs.
So what's the point?
The necessity for these daytime stops seems to be focused more on survival and immediate optimization, not long-term fueling.
Lay out the possible non-fueling reasons they found in the study.
Well, there are 4 key suggestions. First, minimizing exposure to turbulent conditions. Daytime air is much more convective and turbulent than nighttime air, which makes flight harder and riskier.
Okay, efficiency through smoothness. What's the second reason?
Avoiding heat stress or dehydration. Flying during peak solar hours, especially over hot regions, can significantly increase a small bird's physiological demands. Stopping during the day conserves that energy.
And the third reason connects back to that survival factor we mentioned right at the start.
Yes. Avoiding diurnal aerial predators. Raptors and other bird hunters are active during the day. Migrating high overhead makes them vulnerable, so restricting flight to the night drastically minimizes that exposure.
And the fourth reason links back to the LRP's own behavior.
Right. Because LRPs are visual foragers, stopping during the day maximizes their dedicated daylight foraging time. They can recoup minor energy losses while resting, and then focus the demanding migratory flight purely on the safer, smoother, cooler night hours.
It's an optimized use of the 24-hour cycle.
Absolutely.
That just connects everything back beautifully. The LRP is a sophisticated, dynamic traveler.
It's not rigid at all. It has a primary goal time minimization, but it executes that goal with incredible flexibility, adjusting its flight steps dynamically to reflect the predicted resource gradients along its route.
And the data proves that, despite external demands like molt, the bird sticks to the same strategic speed year-round.
It does.
So the study brings us back to the prime function of stopovers. They are, above all else, fueling episodes.
That's right. The strong connections they found between how long the birds stay and how far they fly confirms that the fundamental engine of migration, the need to refuel effectively, remains the primary driver of their strategy.
We started by asking if their priority was time, energy, or survival. We found that time minimization is the LRP's core strategy. But this tactical layer, the runs of nocturnal flights with short daytime stops, suggests they are willing to sacrifice a small amount of time for a huge reduction in risk.
It's the ultimate refined strategy.
It is. If minimizing mortality is that critical third leg of optimal migration theory, and they are masters of time minimization, the real question becomes, just how much time is the little-ringed plover truly willing to trade for safety when it's racing the clock toward the next generation? Something for you to mull or explore on your own.
Always a deeper layer to explore in the logistics of life.
Absolutely. Until next time.